Hi, my name is Danielle Carlberg, and I did my research on combined effective vocabulary strategies for English learners. Why is vocabulary so important? Well, in Colorado, the EL population has grown by 260% just in the past 10 years. If an EL is struggling with reading comprehension, it can usually be traced back to a lack of vocabulary knowledge. And ELs need to know 98% of the words in a text to completely understand the text. That's a huge amount of vocabulary that they need to know in order to be successful. So what I decided to do was to create an innovative plan that would use direct instruction, repetition, free reading, visuals, total physical response, which I will refer to as TPR throughout this presentation, and technology. My two research questions were, number one, what changes would be needed in my classroom to incorporate targeted vocabulary strategies to support the vocabulary skills of English learners? And number two, does reviewing vocabulary words with an adult before they are taught in the classroom benefit an English learner's language acquisition? In terms of the importance of vocabulary, language learners need to master both spoken and written forms of vocabulary and distinguish its meaning to craft successful, meaningful connections socially and mentally. Most curriculums, as many of you have probably observed, do not provide enough repetitious opportunities for EL students to practice vocabulary to the extent of which it is required for mastery. I know in my own curriculums, it has you practice the words maybe once a day, if that, and even then it's just worksheets and stuff like that. So I've had to already do quite a bit of adapting with my own curriculum to meet the needs of my students. So it's really something that is very important. There was a study done by Graves August and Mansilla Martinez where they observed multiple different CLDE certified teachers, and they discovered that even those teachers who were trained to teach EL students were not providing enough opportunities for their EL students to practice vocabulary. Vocabulary is split into three tiers. The first tier would be described as everyday basic words that most students learn in early childhood. Some examples of this would be drive, pen, bed, shower, desk, food, and school. Most EL students might know some of these words, but it's really important for teachers to focus on these words at the very beginning and discover what all the students know before moving on. Tier 2 words are commonly used across different content levels and curriculums, so comprehension, lethal, specific, target, and reread. So these would be the basic content area vocabulary words that you would use throughout the day. And then tier 3 words are specific to a particular content area. So some examples of these would be perimeter, standard deviation, dormant volcano, genus, and thermoregulation. So these EL teachers should stay away from for the most part until they know that their students are ready for them. So overall, focus on making sure your EL students know the tier 1 words and then bits of tier 2 here and there, and only move on to tier 3 if absolutely necessary. So why are the three tiers so important? By identifying words and putting them into the different tiers, teachers are able to focus their time on ensuring that ELs are learning the most important vocabulary words. It also diminishes time overwhelming ELs with words that they may not be ready for or even need, for example, the tier 3 words. And it's also a helpful organizational tool for teachers as they sort through the diverse needs of their students. Repetition is a really important part of vocabulary instruction. Studies have found that learners need to be exposed to vocabulary 8 to 10 times or even 5 to 16 times before they achieve mastery of it. ELs also benefit from repeated exposure to vocabulary words using a variety of different strategies. So as I said above, they have to be exposed to a vocabulary word many more times than what most teachers have already been doing it in order for them to achieve mastery of it. Direct instruction is obviously the first step to teaching vocabulary. It's first important to assess your EL students on what vocabulary they already know in English and any other language that they might know. You can also learn about their home, community, and social life to determine how those areas might affect the student. And then also to understand that students will learn at their own individual pace, but teachers can maximize their instructional time by knowing what their students need and spending their time on that rather than areas the student already understands or even aren't ready for yet. Visual support is a very important strategy that is also very effective. But a couple notes about that is to provide a picture that accurately represents the word. So I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and then I added except for when they're not. Because if you don't use a picture that accurately represents the word, then you could just be confusing your students rather than helping them. It's also important to gather multiple visuals that represent the same word, so whether that be multiple visuals that represent the various different meanings, or just the same, or multiple pictures that represent the same meaning. Either way, it's going to help your students. And then it's really important to make sure that the students are ready for the different meanings, so don't move on to different meanings until you know that your students are ready for it. Technology is something that I think most of us have in our classrooms. Most students have access to devices such as iPads, Chromebooks, iTouches, desktops, computer labs. Maybe some of your schools don't have it, but I know in my school all my kids have access to a Chromebook, or we can go to the computer lab. So in my mind, if you have the technology, you might as well find really effective ways to use it. So studies were done where they use multimedia strategies such as videos, interactive PowerPoints, and static visuals to teach vocabulary words. Both studies found this to be an effective strategy, and it helped increase vocabulary knowledge for ELs at an increased rate. This strategy is also something that can be used whole group, like in front of your class with a smartboard, or a small group with a smaller Chromebook or computer, or students could even work on it independently in their own time if you post, let's say for example, a PowerPoint with pictures and definitions and everything. If you were to post that on Google Classroom or some other type of format where your students could access it and study it in their own time. Free reading and interactive read-alouds. I would say that most teachers, if not all teachers, do have free reading or read-aloud times. So we might as well use it to our advantage. In-class free reading will motivate students to read even after the program is over, and thus they will become autonomous acquirers, which of course is the goal of all education. Studies have found that students naturally learn words throughout independent free reading or interactive read-alouds as long as they know how to use their context clues. So part of this would be ensuring that students know how to use their context clues so that when they are doing their free reading time or even throughout read-alouds, they're using those strategies to help understand different vocabulary words. And then one of the benefits of interactive read-alouds is that the teacher has the power to choose which vocabulary words to focus on and also which ones not to. So there again, it's just using the expertise of the teacher to decide what the students are ready for and what they're not. Total physical response, as I said, TPR, is another great strategy. It refers to the connection between body movements and language. So studies have found that there's a positive relationship between acting out words and learning new vocabulary words. I have found this to be very successful in my own classroom. I use a lot of TPR movements in mostly math and some social studies, but I would like to use it more in all of my content areas because I've definitely seen that as a successful way for my students to learn vocabulary words. So now for my methodology section, I designed an innovative plan, and it had two purposes. The first one was with a specific design plan for vocabulary instruction integrated through all content areas. I believe I, along with the other teachers who will be implementing this plan, will make vocabulary a priority, and we will see the benefits of that for all our students, especially our ELs. And the second purpose of this would be to provide a toolkit of effective vocabulary strategies for ELs that I can share with my coworkers. So in other words, I want to be able to present this to my coworkers to help give them some good ideas on how to meet the needs of EL students, because many of my coworkers, aside from a couple classes in college, haven't had a lot of training on how to teach EL students, and I think that this could be really helpful for them. All of my vocabulary words will be based on the Common Core State Standards and Colorado Academic Standards. I believe in focusing on those and not wasting time anywhere else. So my plan is to create Google Slides for each lesson in the 4 main content areas. So reading and writing, or literacy, math, social studies, and science. Now here again, most curriculums will show you which words they have decided are the vocabulary words for that week. So I would definitely use those. And then if there were any others that I thought were important, I would include those as well. And I would make separate Google Slides for each of these so that if, one year I'm working on lesson 1 in this content area and lesson 2 and 5 and 6 or whatever, I'm not constantly moving around PowerPoints. I'll just have little separate ones for each lesson. And then I will be working with 3 other classes to implement this over 12 weeks. So I teach at a Track 1 school. So I'm the only 3rd grade teacher at my school, but I have a close relationship with other teachers at the other elementary school in our district. So I would work with 3 other classes from that school. And our demographics are pretty similar, so that would be good. So here's an example of what one of the slides would look like. So at the top, I would obviously have the term, which in this case would be the plateau. And then I would have my kid-friendly definitions. So a landform that is raised with a flat top, or it looks like a mountain with the top cut off. In this picture, I have 2 different examples. They're on 2 different continents, so I would explain that to my students. And we would look at the different parts of a plateau. So as you can see, it goes up and then it's cut across and all that. And then I would also have a sentence using the word in context. So my sentence here is, once they reached the top of the plateau, the hikers were able to relax on the flat ground and set up camp. So relax on the flat ground, and once they reach the top would show that a plateau is like a mountain and the top is flat. And then finally for the TPR part, I would show students how to make a plateau with their hands. So this would be a mountain and this would be a plateau, and we would kind of go through that whole thing. This is an example of my research design. If you want to pause and look at it, you can. But basically, I have my 2 different groups, my experimental group and my control group. And then I have a pretest that everybody takes. My experimental group will have the independent variable, and then everybody will take the post-test number 1, and then we'll also have the independent variable, and then everybody will take the post-test number 2 as well. So the first step in my experiment is to look for a correlation between repetition of vocabulary words at home and EL vocabulary acquisition. So the Friday before a new lesson is being started, all classes would take a vocabulary pretest on Google Survey, all 4 classes. Then the Google Slides for those lessons would be posted on Google Classroom in the 2 experimental groups. All students from these 2 classes would be instructed to view the slides with an adult or parent if possible over the weekend. And I would talk one-on-one with the EL students to make sure that they knew how important it was to review the slides over the weekend with an adult. Now, if they don't have access to technology at home or an adult who could help them, both of our schools have homework clubs after school every day, so they could do that with a teacher from homework club, so they would still be able to receive that part. Then the following Monday, students would take a post-test similar to the pretest to determine if reviewing the words with an adult over the weekend made a difference. Then once a day throughout the week, the 2 classes doing the experiment would use direct instruction to teach the students with the Google Slides. And then there would be an additional post-test that Friday for all 4 classes. To analyze the results, I would compare EL vocabulary test scores with non-EL test scores in both the control and experimental groups. Then I would also compare the vocabulary test scores of ELs who reviewed the words over the weekend with an adult. I would not take into account how many times, just for the sake of simplicity, with the adults who did not review the words over the weekend with an adult. I would then compare the vocabulary test scores for ELs in the experimental group with ELs in the control group. And then finally, if the scores increased overall after accounting for extraneous variables, if they increased for ELs, whether it be either for reviewing the slides over the weekend or through direct instruction of the slides, I would conclude that this innovative plan was successful. So a couple of examples of extraneous variables that I thought of would be if the teacher forgot to teach the slides one of those days, or a couple times throughout those 12 weeks, or if the teachers in the control group maybe tried a little harder because they wanted to prove that they were still doing a good job, which is human. Or if the students, when they took the survey, said that they did review it with an adult when they actually didn't. And then just different teaching styles between the two of us who would be doing the experimental group. That can make a difference as well. A couple of extensions that I could do with this would be to look at all the data about how many times an EL student reviewed the vocabulary slides over the weekend and determine if there was a correlation between that and achievement on the first vocabulary post-test. And then I could also look at the relationship between free reading and vocabulary acquisition. So finally, I plan to use these Google Slides with my class this year, and will share it with my coworkers. I already do something similar to this, but I really enjoyed doing the research on this because it gave me a lot of better ideas on how to strengthen my Google Slides and make them a lot more effective for my students. And then I have my references here. Thanks for listening.